Welcome to Let's Draw Pokemon. Today we're going to be drawing our first Pokemon ever. And who are we doing? We're going to be doing Bulbasaur. He's Mr. 001, so why not start with him first? So I'm using Adobe Photoshop. As you can see, I've drawn circular shapes, one for the head, one for the body. His body is a bit more oval shaped than round. So yeah. One important thing whenever you're breaking down characters and trying to discern how you should draw them and where to start, you definitely just want to start sketching out shapes. Look for the shapes within the character. Like if you look at a character like Bulbasaur, he has a fairly roundish head that looks like it may have been once a ball that got squished. Then you have his body that's also takes on a roundish shape. He's a pretty roly-poly little guy. He has fairly rounded legs as well. They're kind of, if you think about bowling pins, they're a little reminiscent of those, with a flat bottom and then a rounded, not quite a cylindrical shape, but a little more round, like a mix between a sphere and a cylinder. One of the best things you can do whenever you're designing is to look for the shapes within the object and trying to draw those out and define them. So I've refined the sketch a bit from those two really rough looking circles, and now I'm going for the bulb on his back. Again, the bulb is kind of circular too, with a protrusion coming out the back. I guess like your stereotypical onion you would see drawn, or if you went and looked at one, they kind of curve up into a cone-like shape, but then it splits out at the top like something's bursting forth. And if any of you are Poke fans, you probably think of things like Leech Seed coming out of there, or Stun Spore, and fun stuff like that. Because our little Bulbasaur is going to grow up and become a very big Venusaur and be very poisonous. And now I'm going to figure out how the mouth looks. While you're drawing, you should always be considering that these things aren't just flat objects. They're very much 3D. It's a 3D interpretation of it. And whenever you go to color, you're going to be thinking of the 3D shapes and how they interact with light. So we're just going with a fairly basic shape and drawing the teeth out there. And now we're going for the eyes, which aren't completely rounded. They have a flatter base. I guess a little more egg-shaped, like if you flattened out the base of an egg. And of course you just need to refine the sketch as much as you can. And I added in little nostrils and all these other little details that lend to the shape of Bulbasaur. Like he has a little bit of an eyebrow ridge, and here we are drawing his irises and the pupils and fun stuff like that. And of course he has little tiny claws. They're triangular in shape. And so you want to capture all those little details. It's the details that start really adding to the character. It's good to go and get a strong base foundation of like the big shapes that make the silhouette of the figure. And then once you start adding in these little details, it really starts pulling everything together. It gives it a little more life, and you know, that face is just adorable and it's hard to say no to it. And so of course Bulbasaur is a spotted little guy. So we'll be adding in his spots and additional detail and stuff like that. And of course you don't have to, by no means do you have to go and draw the spots exactly like I'm drawing them, or like how you've seen it in official art or anything like that. Every Bulbasaur is different. Feel free to have fun with the different markings. Think of them like your cat or your dog. Like no two really look identical, unless maybe you have identical dog twins for some reason. But have fun with the shapes. I remember seeing one Bulbasaur in the anime whenever I was a kid, And it had like a little heart shape on its head and stuff like that. So it was pretty cute. So just have fun with the shapes, make it your own. It doesn't have to be exact or perfectly matched up with what you've seen through the franchise. This is going to be your Bulbasaur, and always keep that in mind whenever you're drawing, that this is your creation and that you can add your own little bits of style to it. So we're just going to lighten the sketch out so then we could draw over top of it and ink it. So the style we're going for is going to be, I guess, reminiscent of Ken Sugimori, one of the main artists for Pokemon and the main creator of, you know, drawing all these little creatures. So I'm just going to be inking here. There's many different ways you can try inking this. In this one I'm just using a brush. I guess the main key would be that, like, if you were drawing on white paper and you've drawn this out, sketched it out in pencil, that you could erase your pencil lines or hide them in some way. Because the sole purpose of them was to create a foundation upon which to base your drawing. So they're kind of sloppy, they're a little messy, and they're not what you want your final art piece to be. So we're just going to work on finishing up the lines, and then we'll go on to coloring and getting this all finished up. Okay, so it looks like we have our fully inked Bulbasaur. I did not draw in those pupils for a reason, because on the official illustrations of Bulbasaur it's like white. It doesn't have little black pupils, it's more like a highlight. And as for the palette below, I sat down beforehand and made a color palette from the color picker in Photoshop of the different colors I would need. So like the base color, and then what would be needed for shadows. And then I'm probably going to just do some highlights over top as well. But these are the base colors that I need. You usually just pick them out from the color wheel, or if you really need to, source an image online and draw them from, or like pick the colors out with the color picker tool. It's kind of handy trying to use the color wheel instead of the color picker off an image, because it starts helping you get a sense of like where colors are situated on the wheel and what you would need to create your palettes. If you're doing it from home and you're using pencil crayons, markers, stuff like that, just get the closest matching colors you can. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is your Bulbasaur. If he's a little more blue than green, that's fine. Or maybe you're drawing a shiny variant of him. Has anybody out there actually caught a shiny Bulbasaur, is my question. But I know I haven't. But, you know, you might be doing different colors and different things with this Bulbasaur. Or maybe you're making him some sort of colored theme, or if you have like a certain color scheme in mind, like you're like, man, I wish they had colored Bulbasaur like this. Like, this is the time to do it. You have your nice ink sketch in front of you, so feel free to play with it. So right now I'm just gonna go and color in color the eyes white, so they look a little more like a regular Bulbasaur. I'm starting to add in some shading. One thing whenever you're coloring and shading things, because This is a very important thing you have to consider. You have to think of your drawings are obviously flat 2D images. There's no avoiding that. That's just what they are whenever you go and sketch them out. But whenever you're thinking about coloring them or rendering them out, you have to think of them as a 3D object, like a three-dimensional object on your paper. If you don't, you just color it flat, it'll lend to a certain style, which is fine, but it's not really the style I'm going for with this piece, and I think sometimes it's a little challenging to add in that three-dimensional look to it. It gives it a little more, it bounces off the page a bit better and he jumps out a little more. So it's definitely something you would want to try to capture. So while you're doing this, you want to think back to whenever we were sketching Bulbasaur out. Think about what shapes was he made out of? Like why am I coloring this a certain way? Like, I guess the main thing would be like you look at things like his bulb. You're like, okay, in my mind, his bulb is like an onion. And onions are a rounded shape. So whenever you go to color that bulb, you want to think, how does light react with an onion bulb? So it goes and hits it. Shadows come on part of it. You'll end up with like rim lighting and stuff like that, depending on the lighting. You get highlights in certain areas. But then it's also leafy, so you have to consider that too. We're not going to go too in depth with that, but considering that we're going for like, I guess a similar look to how Ken Sugimori did his Pokemon originally, so it's not going to be hyper real or anything scary like that right now, guys. So feel free to experiment with it and just think about the shapes. Like whenever you're coloring this leg, you know that the one leg is going to be like the one part will be encased in shadow. And I'm going for, like whenever I'm shading it out, I'm going a little more rounded because I'm like, I know that that form is going to be in that kind of way. So the lighting's coming from probably upper left corner in this one. So you'd shade underneath his chin. His chest is probably in shadow because his head's blocking it and the rest of his body's blocking out the light. So you wouldn't expect to see like crazy highlights there or anything like that. Because you have to think about how, like, yeah, you have your shape, but how are the other shapes interacting with it? Do they block some of the light coming down, casting it in shadows? Really fun thing about using Photoshop or other programs like this is that they have layers. So you can make a layer dedicated to just trying something out. And if it doesn't work, or if it's not what you were envisioning, you can always just delete it. And, you know, you got to experiment with something new. You got to try something new out to see if it would work with your vision. And if it does, well, there you go. You came up with a really awesome new idea. And if it didn't work out at all, you tried it. And that way you know for the future that, oh, well, that doesn't exactly work how I thought. So I'll try something new. So you always want to just experiment and be open to trying new things and not being afraid of, you know, being adventurous with your drawing. That's another important thing that I think a lot of people will miss out on, is that they get a little too safe and they don't want to mess up the drawing. Like, I'm going to wreck the whole thing if I do this. Like, you have to be willing to like step out of that comfort zone and start trying new things. And, you know, a lot of the time you'll end up trying it and sometimes they don't work out and it'll look disastrous and you'll be like, why did I do this? But then you'll have those other times when you get that eureka moment and you'll be like, oh my goodness, if I do this, it interacts like that. And oh, wow, this looks really good. And you're seeking those moments, those times of enlightenment whenever it feels like your art has now moved up a level. So on the image now, now that a lot of the dark shadows are put in, I'm adding in some highlights. Highlights just really, you really can't have an object without having shadows and highlights. You have the darkness and then you have the light. You have to bring out that balance. It allows the image to pop a little more and gives more credence to the shapes. Gives them more volume and a little more sense of three-dimensional space on your page. So you'll just add in like little bits of highlights. Look where the light is hitting the shape. Feel free to just play around with it and try and go with what you feel looks right. We're pretty good for Bulbasaur now. I think he's looking pretty finished. So, I just want to thank everyone for watching, and I hope this helps you with your own character creations and creating your own little Pokemon masterpieces out there. Stay tuned for some more Pokemon drawings. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.